session, after lunch session, and we are following up after some local stars, I think. So the room is rather sparse, but I hope that our discussion will be so scintillating that it will draw in big crowds, right? So without further ado, we will begin. Thank you again, KLF, for introducing us so nicely, and it always helps the moderator when she doesn't have introduced because it always takes too long. But what's really nice about all these three writers, apart from the fact, of course, that they are kick-ass women, is that they are trying to reimagine, in a sense, how we think of children's worlds, whether in real life, reality, or in fictional narratives. And that is my great excitement in working with them and in engaging them in conversation today. I want to, since these are all writers, and I think that our panels don't give enough time to actually getting a taste of the writer's work, I think it's important to do some readings at Lit Fests. So I'm going to first invite them one by one to do a short reading on a theme that we have discussed and finalized, which we'll discuss right after the readings. So who wants to go first? Paddy, do you want to go first? Okay. No, after. Don't. Let them just...
So I'm reading a little excerpt from a story called Joey and His Mood. Better? Okay. Joey's mood was most helpful when he got dressed every day. Somehow Joey would know what he needed to wear. Sorry. Somehow Joey would know that he needed to wear, isn't it echoing?
No.
Okay. To wear a yellow shirt with his blue jeans, or that he needed to wear a black t-shirt with his black jeans. Joey's mother had let him choose his own clothes since he was 2 years old. Even then, Joey knew what he wanted to wear. One day it was yellow, and then it was green, and often it was black. But sometimes, all the clothes were wrong, and then Joey wished and wished he didn't have to think about his clothes like he didn't have to think about his hat. That's because Joey wore his hat every day. It was white and cotton and floppy, and Joey loved it. He could pull it down over his eyes or push it back on his head and make it look as if it was dancing. Every day, as Joey got out of bed and brushed his teeth and washed his face, his hat went on his head. Whether he was in a sad mood or a happy mood, the hat was on. He always put it on before he had finished dressing for school, so that he had to take it off and put it back on many times as he pulled on his vest or t-shirt or sweater. Joey never minded taking his hat on and off. He just wanted to get it on as soon as possible. And so he put it on after brushing his teeth and washing his face. When Joey first started wearing his hat, which his mother had bought him one summer when he was 4, both she and his dad kept telling him to take it off. "Get that silly hat off your head," said his dad to Joey. "Get that dirty hat off your head," said his mother to Joey. Joey pretended not to hear what they said. Instead, he poured some more cereal into his bowl and stared at the floating rice, imagining he was eating little worms. "Yum," he murmured as he spooned the crawling worms into his mouth, only to feel his head thwacked because his dad had leaned over and pulled off his hat. Joey did not like this one bit. He wanted his hat back, and he wanted no thwacks on his head. But Joey knew that he should say nothing right then. So he said nothing and waited until his dad and mom had left the table. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Nupur, do you want to take it away next?
This is an excerpt from a chapter that's called Childhood Desires. 4-year-old Freya has a story where she is the queen. Her father is the king, and Freya's older sister is the princess. Mother is the servant. 3-year-old Isha and her mother are walking down a long carpeted corridor back to their hotel room when she turns to her mother and says, "Mama, let's race. The winner gets Papa." At age 5, Iman tells her mother, "Why did you have to marry Papa? He was my last chance." A few weeks later, she adds, "Actually, it's okay that you married Papa. He makes a very good Papa." 9-year-old Tanya tells her father she likes his face and wants to kiss him on his mouth. Her father is stunned at this directness of her attraction towards him. 8-year-old Urvashi play acts with her father where he is Barack Obama and she is his wife Michelle. 6-year-old Arjun loves his father, but when it comes to bedtime, he tells his father, "You go and sleep on the floor because the bed is not large enough for 4. Arjun's sister and mom as well, and he wants to sleep with his mom. 4-year-old Samir is asked what he wants to be when he grows up, and he says he wants to marry his mother. The child's attraction to the parent of the opposite sex is well established in psychoanalytic literature, and even Wikipedia will inform you that it is entirely unexceptional. The examples above will not shock most people who listen to their children's fantasies, imagination, and comments. Yet, when most of us think about children and desire or childhood sexuality, the concept seems to be an oxymoron because children and sexuality are considered to be on opposite poles. Perhaps the difficulty here is with our limited understanding of the term sexuality as much as it is about our blinkered awareness of children's inner worlds. Sexuality is more than sex and genitals. It includes gender, it includes emotion, it includes all our communication, verbal and non-verbal. It is our desire to join up with people and be close to them and to have them be close to us. It is our creativity and our beauty. Sexuality is what makes us attractive to another. It is our inner beauty.
Thank you. Reshma.
Hi, the book is called The Hidden Children, and the section I'm going to read is when Shui, my protagonist, actually encounters the community that is at the heart of the story. I looked up to see we'd arrived at a large wooden door the color of a dark chocolate bar. It pulled at me. I didn't know if that was because it was magical or just plain beautiful to look at. I felt like if I put my hand on it, it would pulsate. Anya seemed as unsure as I. The door had no hinges and seemed to grow out of stone. There was no handle, of course. Anya moved forward and knocked 3 times. Then she traced an infinity sign and drew 2 arches underneath. "It's the Sul de Moa," she said, "the eye of the god." Shui just said, "I have no idea what she's talking about," as always. Nothing happened. Perhaps there's no one there. "It's the Bilerats," she said. "There's always someone here. They live here. They'll come." So she turned to me. "When they ask you how you found out, tell them you made the pencil move, yes?" "I did make the pencil move," I said. "I mean, if there's some sort of minimum bar, perhaps it's best if I'm No. I mean, tell them it happened because you just happened to do it by accident." Click, the door swung open. "Actually, say nothing at all," and we walked in. I was instantly blinded by the glare of the white hospital-like fluorescence, and I turned to see complete darkness fill the stone corridor behind me. I recalled the scene in The Poltergeist when the little girl walked towards the door. What came after was not good. Once our eyes adjusted, we found ourselves standing in a white tunnel with no edges. At the end of it, we came to another door, similar in every way to the one behind us, only much larger. It slid upwards to reveal lots and lots of plants. "I think we're here," she whispered as she stepped in. A door behind us slid shut and I gulped. It was a circular room topped up by an inky blue ceiling. Running water cooed in the background and we followed the path to a stone archway and wooden floors so perfect Dad would have knelt down to worship them. A tree with a trunk as thick as a car rose 2 stories high and branches spread out to create a ceiling. The effect was 100 brown anacondas coiled around green leaves. To say my mind exploded would be simplifying my reaction. It was so astonishing I just stared and whispered, "I'm in Lothorian." I turned to Anya, who was less impressed. "Are they all like this?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, staring at the trunk. She bent forward and said, "Namaste." "Seriously?" I chided. This is the Bilerat, she said, looking at me in a way that Mum does when she knows I'm never going to understand. It is a tree of knowledge, our tree of life. Hello, I heard from behind me. Both of us turned to see a figure walk towards us. She seemed to have entered from one of the many archways dotting the white wall at the edge of the circle. Welcome, she said, spreading her arms. The lady was wearing a pale pink sari with the pallu bunched up on her shoulder, its edge wrapped around her and then tucked into the petticoat at her tummy. Mum would not be impressed. Hello, said the Anya, her tone faltering. She seemed as taken aback as her appearance as I. Anya Sindesi, she said in a big throaty voice. We've been waiting for you, Pa. Anya lowered her head and said, Priestess. No, no, the lady waved her hand and the fat beneath her arms jiggled. We don't have all that rubbish here. Just call me Anahita. My full name is Anahita Vaidyanathan. And you? She turned to look at me. Your good name? I opened my mouth. But you are the priestess, yes? Asked Anya. Well, I am what the Puranas have decided to make of me. Sometimes priestess, other times cook, sometimes bai. We live for the ones we serve, don't we? And whom do we serve, my child? The old ways, said Anya and lowered her head. Come, come, she waved to us to follow her. We have a lot to talk about. Raised on a strict diet of fairy tales, my idea of witches were white, gowny, Galadriel type otherworldly things with European accents and beautiful hair. Or the psycho in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang who gave me many sleepless nights. At no point were there bubbly, chubby, pink sari-clad women.
Right. Thank you so much, all of you. So obviously, must have given you some sense of what the theme is that we wanted to talk about first, and that is all these writers, Padmini and Reshma in their fictional worlds for young adults, and Nupur when she's working with children in her consulting room as a child psychotherapist and then writing about them. Busting stereotypes, getting away from the myths that we have grown up with about children's inner worlds or about children's worlds, period, is a very important thing to them. Why is this? Reshma, do you want to?
I think that we've all grown up with Enid Blyton, starting off very young, or even moving beyond that to the Grimm's fairy tales, Sleeping Beauty, being kissed, woken up, the fact that the witch is always bad, and that good and evil are always black and white. And beyond that, even as Indian children, we're always told, we're never represented in our books, and we're always taught of the good fairies being blonde and pretty, and even Galadriel, for that perspective, in the J.R. Tolkien books was always European. Anyway, Tolkien was European, but we have been, especially I've been brought up on white fairy tales, and there's nothing wrong in that. I mean, it's made me who I am, and I'm very happy about being brought up. But what I think that makes us question what our stereotypes are, and what our body shapes need to be, and what is beautiful to us growing up, and whether black hair can be cool, whether brown eyes are beautiful. And I think, and our understanding of just body image, language, is the North better than the South? What do powerful people look like? And I think that is something I wanted to address in this book, and I hope I did it with some of the stuff that I wrote.
Nupur, in your consulting room, of course, this is an issue that you deal with in real life. The fact that there is, when your book itself, when you call it Love and Rage, you know, oddly enough, a lot of parents, I mean, at least my parents' generation, would rather see me or their children as devoid of this love, okay, but of a certain kind of love for parents, love for siblings, but you know, and then also hierarchize your love for friends as important as love for family. Why, right? And then rage to hona, there should not be any rage. So how do you deal with this when you're writing about it and in your consulting room?
So I wanted to write this and call the book by this particular name in order really to bust the stereotype. Because we like to, as a society, paint our children one color. And that one color is usually a compliant color. Like, good children are those who listen to their parents. Now, that's very convenient, but for a while. And There is a lovely story by Devnath Patnaik actually, where he tells a story about this child who only listened to his parents. So he would do nothing if there was no instruction given.
Like perfect Peter.
And he was told to go to the market and buy some bananas. So he went to the market and bought some bananas. But he didn't come back home because he wasn't told to come back home. So do we really want children like that? Are we talking about leaders and making leaders all the time? But what is that? I mean, how does somebody become a leader if you can't hear your own voice? If you don't know who you are? It's so easy to be led by perpetual scrolling on your smartphone, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, if you don't have a mind of your own. I mean, are we all being trained to be sheep so that we just follow the sheep in front of us?
Right.
So the stereotype that really I wanted to get away from is, can we please as parents start looking at the child we have in front of us, the individual child with their particular personality and temperament and mind and emotions, and not some idea about my child will grow up to be an engineer. That came out of a box.
Right. Paddy, a lot of your stories are precisely doing what she's talking about. They are putting forth that young adult or child protagonist who's saying, I'm not going to do it your way, pushing back, right? Is that a really important focus in your stories?
Absolutely, and I mean, I'll pick up what Nupur was just saying and say that I think what I wanted to do in these stories was bust the idea that parents have that they have compliant children who are waiting to be molded by them and whose reactions they can control. Because in fact, children, like the first story of mine is called Baby Looking Out, and it's a baby who's about 9 months old, who's being held by its mother and is comfortable with the mother, but every time the mother holds the baby in any way that doesn't have the baby looking outward into the world, the baby protests. And the mother has no choice in the matter, but has to hold the baby that way. And I think, you know, everybody, whether you've had children or you haven't, you know that children have very clear minds of their own and they know how to let it be known. And actually, for the most part, I think adults have to end up kind of following what their kids want, whether it's all the way down to the tantrum or not. So anyway, I would say that, yes, my stories are very much trying to bust. The main stereotype they're trying to bust is that children are compliant and that they're passive receivers of molding from their parents, because I would suggest it's, in fact, perhaps the parents are being molded by the children.
So I'm going to skip more readings because, you know, we've been told we've got less than 50. Yeah, I have to open it up. But I do want to talk about the other thing I do want to move on to the next thing we were talking about, which is that in your work, one of the key issues is what will a child give up to be really extraordinary? The way I see it is, why is it important for a child to believe she is extraordinary? Why would you say that?
I think in my book, I was trying to understand the price children or young adults specifically would pay to be extraordinary. And while I know you don't want to read the passage, at the heart of the story, it's because this girl wants to please her mother. And because her mother believed that mediocrity had no place in this world. And that flows into the book in that the same girl goes and asks another girl, what price would you pay to speak to a butterfly? And I wanted to understand, and I think Nupur and I were discussing this earlier, I wanted to show in the story the joy in the ordinary and in true friendship. So there is this part in the book where she's made these extraordinary friends, and she's in what is a coven, and they're doing things like throwing chairs across the room, and they're making it rain, and they're doing all these wonderful things. But in the end, when things go wrong, and she comes and she finally finds the friends that she's grown up with, she sits back down, and they're bickering, the two friends. They're constantly bickering before, and she used to get tired of them bickering. This Nalini constantly talking, and they're bickering, and she bursts into tears because she says, this is my coven. This silliness is what I really wanted. And she does go on to go towards that mission, but she goes along with people who she takes along with, rather than people who perhaps who could just give it to her on a platter, but having to do things that, you know, they wanted her to do. But at the heart of it all is, again, and we're talking so much about parental compliance here, it's all about the kind of influence we have on our children and what we make them. And if every part of the story, it is about mothers and daughters and fathers and daughters.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you might say, and it all seems to come back to the
Nupur,
pressure.
I wanted to come to you at that point. You know, one of the things we have talked about a lot is how much parents will condition children based on their gender. You know, and with your work with Art of Sport, I mean, this is something that comes up again and again. And do you want to talk about that, about how parents react if the boy child is not playing sports and if the girl child is not playing sports? You know, the two completely different reactions.
Before that, I just want to quickly talk about extraordinary and ordinary. Yeah. So a lot of my work is with children under the age of 5. And what I deeply believe is that it is the ordinariness of daily life that has the greatest impact on who we're going to become. What feels normal to us and feels familiar to us is what happens every day. And if that is everydayness is about parents who get along, a family that communicates, then that will feel familiar. If that every day is where there is a lot of violence and aggression, then that will feel familiar. Yeah. And we tend to unknowingly model our later lives on the basis of that which feels familiar, but we don't know about it logically. And as boys and girls and sport, and how parents influence children in this area. So I run a program called The Art of Sport, which is trying to make young girls between the ages of 6 and 15 try to make it ordinary for them to use their bodies as a source of strength. And by this I mean an ordinary experience of playing. Football, basketball, running, jumping, climbing up a rope, jumping from a monkey bar. Things that we, as a society, we expect our boys to do. If a boy is sitting inside for too long, he will be told, go outside and play. But if a girl is sitting inside day after day after day, nobody will be surprised. No one will think that something is wrong with that. But she has a body also. She has muscles also. She needs to use them also. And we get conditioned into believing that, you know, some genders X and some genders Y, and that they must, and it's okay for these things to be so disparate. And that's another stereotype that we are trying to counteract.
Right. Paddy, I was thinking that brings me to another theme in your stories, which is the importance of play. And this is something I think you felt very strongly about. We discussed this back in Delhi too. That why is it that, you know, we have schools teaching you discipline and schoolwork and homework, but nobody is really telling children, we're going to take you through play. Like, we're going to take you through playing on your own and making an imaginary world for yourself. This is important for you. Why?
I mean, it seems to me that just as children sort of stretch themselves, let's say physically, to discover what it is that they can do with their physical bodies, in a similar way they do so with their imaginations, with their emotions, with different aspects of what it means to figure themselves out in the world that they live in. So I think undirected play, you know, play which is exploratory, unsupervised, which does not mean abandoning your child, but just sort of letting a child discover, and to discover with, I mean, random things, I don't know, fallen bits of cardboard, flowers, stones, whatever comes your way. I just feel like it can't be replaced by the organized play that most children tend to today. And to me, I don't know, it seems so obvious that I hardly even have anything to sort of say about it, because it's where you're going to discover yourself and you're going to discover leadership, etc., etc. And I feel very grateful I was born at a time when play was actually regarded as a very integral, necessary part of daily life.
Yeah, so
I mean,
that's an
just as much
important
as you
thing.
did your homework, you went out and you played with your friends for 2 hours every day.
Yeah. It's
and
not
just-
something
yeah.
new. We are not reinventing the wheel, right?
No, but I think that as kids have become more programmed because they have violin lessons and soccer practice and whatever it is that they have at 3, you know, they've lost that time, that stretch of time where you don't have anything particular to do, but where you discover and develop who you are.
Well, there's the other problem where Scandinavian countries, which are supposed to be the best with education policies and imagination, are pushing school starting age back and back.
Right.
We are pushing in Delhi, we put them in proper school at 3, which is ridiculous. And you start getting homework when you're 4. I mean, but I'm being told that after 4 minutes I have to open it up to discussion. Of course, if there are no questions, I'll have more questions. But I want each one of you to quickly comment on one thing that is very important to me, and when I read your books, you know, important in your books, which is that in our culture of toxic masculinity, we live in an ecosystem where fathers are not important in children's lives, or fathers are considered dispensable. You go and earn the money, I'll bring up the child, says the Indian mother. How is that really damaging for our children? Nupur, can we start with you?
I don't think I can do this in 4 minutes. I need more like 4 hours. In the consulting room, the majority of the times, the parent who brings in a child saying, I'm worried about my child, there's something not okay, is the mother. It's very rare that I have a father who makes the first phone call. And most of the time, the mother seems to assume that I will just see her and the child. As if, and if I mention, but I need to see the father of this child, whether you are still married, divorced, living separately, together, is immaterial. The child's father is still the child's father, whether mother likes it or not. And this is a very difficult part of the process where I ask for father to be there and people are surprised. And then all kinds of hoops about, oh, but he works. Yes, but so do many other people.
So do mothers.
And so do mothers. And I'm working too. And it's something that I have to persist with, to involve the father in the life of the child. And there's 10,000 words in the book telling stories about how that went.
Reshma?
Yeah. Sorry. I think in my novel, one of the most important person in her world was her father, and her brother. Despite the fact that the mother's the one who's constantly supporting her and constantly pushing the decisions that make her world okay. But her heartbreak comes, and it came very naturally in my book. And I don't know, you don't know how these things happen in your novel. You're writing it, and the character takes on the life of its own. And the heartbreak she finds when she feels that the person that she's loved the most for all her life has just betrayed her. And it came so naturally to me, even in my life, my mother's the guiding force. And I think that absolutely this need to please the father and to please the brother also is something we need to work towards. And it's in fact interesting because later on in the book, the mother takes over. And she says, no, this is enough already. You can, she will do as she pleases.
So that's the other face of it, the fact that we've spent too much time sort of performing to get the male kind of care providers.
Because
approval.
he's the provider. He's the one who makes the decision when you move from one country to another for the job,
Paddy, one of your most evocative stories is an absent father. And then it's only when that gap is filled that we come full circle. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that, but before doing that, I want to just say that one of the dilemmas, I think, for me in the worlds that I have, where most of the parenting in these stories is actually being done by the women, is in a way to, it's a dilemma as a writer. Do you reflect the societies you see around you? And then how do you go about, you could obviously have a story in which there are no fathers doing any kind of child rearing, because often that's the case,
It's women's work.
Right. So you have to find the right kind of balance to reflect the world you're creating, as well as suggest an alternate model for how parenting might be done. So in Soman and the Toot, a father disappears because fathers do sometimes disappear. And then there's obviously turbulence that ensues after that before something can be kind of corrected in that world. And the presence of the father is sort of significant not only for the child but for the wife, for the community. I mean, there's a whole sort of layer of people who are dependent on having the present father, yeah?
So I'm going to ask, are there questions in the audience? Any questions in the audience? Yes, gentleman here. Do we have a mic for the gentleman? Can we be quick about these things, because as it is, we now have 30 minutes instead of 45, so we keep losing more time in these handovers.
Good afternoon. So my question's about unstructured play and unstructured play that was talked about and how that...
unsupervised play.
Also
Imaginative
unstructured
play.
yeah, which leads to creativity eventually. And the situation with regards to our urban environments. Do our present urban environments actually allow for this to happen? Isn't there an issue that to let kids... So I've had a situation where my daughter just went out into the garden in her grandparents' place, and she was making a cap out of leaves because we said it was sunny, which that wouldn't have happened if she was in my apartment. And just thinking about that, I realized that how much she's missing and how that kind of unstructured play leads to creativity because they're forced to think of and create their own toys out of what they find in the environment.
You want to take that, Nupur?
I think it's absolutely a very relevant concern that our way in which our current urban environments are designed boxes us in, and that really does come in the way. As parents, we have to find those opportunities and perhaps in neighborhoods in small ways create those opportunities. It doesn't take very much space for a child under 5 to have a pile of sand and some stones and sticks and be able to entertain themselves for a reasonable amount of time. And we have to begin, you see, our generation was brought up to believe, as parents, was brought up to believe that educational toys is what we needed to buy. And and most of us fell for it. Because, you know, it's going to make our child do better in school somehow. And if we are loud enough, we might be able to reclaim some space in our local parks, in our neighborhoods, and our playgrounds to have space for unstructured play. What you're going to have as a bigger counterpoint actually is children coming back to you saying, I'm bored. And challenging that is going to be
It just makes
really
parenting harder because they have so many more stimuli, isn't it?
Well, actually, it's not our work to entertain them. Yeah. But again, that's something else we've fallen for, that we have to entertain our children. Being bored can be very, very valuable.
And can lead to creativity?
And leads to creativity if you let it hang around long enough and you don't see it as a big problem. I mean, after all, what is being bored? You're saying my own company isn't good enough. I am not good enough to entertain myself. My own mind cannot produce something that will keep it going. That's not true. We've just been brought up to believe that. You don't need a screen or a smartphone or a game to entertain you. Your mind is, your imagination is, what was that word you said?
The bedrock of society.
There you go, bedrock of society.
Imagination is the bedrock of society. And if
And
you
we are
don't
quoting other
start
people.
that with children, it's never going to happen. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, lady in green.
So my question is related to the unbalanced equations of parenting with mother and father roles. Do you think we need to come up, I want you to comment on the importance of maybe feminist literature coming in children's books. So would it change the kind of equation we have with that? That is all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and here I was just ranting about, I don't know, all of you have read Twilight, right? Everyone's read Twilight, everyone loves Bella. a lot of the books that came after Twilight, like The Hunger Games and The Immortals, Shadowhunters, Now and Mine, are trying to build a more feminist-centric young adult universe which tells girls, one, they don't need boys to be happy, that they should value female and male friendships above all, and to build a concept of sisterhood. And that power really does come from within. At the end of the day, even if these are magical teenage, and you've just been reading Robin Hobb, how these are external magical stories, essentially they're constantly talking about how girls find strength within to make the right choices when posed with difficult questions like, how far will you go to do something? But yes, and I think there are more and more stories. I think what's happening is we need to get away from the fact that the other day a publisher told me, is there romance in your book? And she was very disappointed when I told her, there's actually very little romance, because I think that at 15, 16, your most intense relationships are with your friends, with your girlfriends and with male friends, but not necessarily, and while that age is where your first flush of romance, before then your most intense relationships are friendships and female friendships, and they actually pull you through the rest of your life when you get older and have children of your own, and that you find yourself going back to those friendships. So young adult literature needs to let girls know that female friendship is important, sisterhood is important. Yeah, I can go on this for a while, so.
There was a question here.
My question is about taking this question to the question of gender. We have this segregation. This is for boys, this is for girls. So a book which has a strong feminist character or a female superhero, there'll be a first thing that, hey, you're a boy, you shouldn't be reading that. Or when he's picking it up, there'll be friends saying, hey, he's reading a girl's fiction. So this is a question that I face on a daily basis. That's because my son is addicted to all magical stuff. He follows all the fairies and stuff.
What's your question?
So my question is this gender division. When the child is picking up, do we keep the child gender neutral when he's picking up a book to read? Or is it there that we create that bias?
I can very simply say, whether it's a boy or a girl, make them read more books about girls, first of all. We have too many books for children and young adults with boy protagonists. It's a shocking statistic. So find those books which have female protagonists. Paddy, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, it's really startling that girls find it easy, apparently, to identify with male protagonists. We're all trained that way, and it doesn't work the other way. So I think as a parent, one thing that it's a choice you can make, and you can make it consistently and deliberately, is to throw in the path of your boy books where there are girls to identify with, and there are plenty of those available.
My question was just the opposite. When a boy just likes a female character or follows it, he becomes a kind of a laughing stock around. He tends to draw within because he can't talk about it with his other friends who are boys. That's a psychological problem that he faces.
Well, I think give those boys presents of books that have girl protagonists. You've got a larger job ahead of you, so that might be one way to widen that.
I mean, there's so little of that happening. I think if there's a little boy wanting to read books with girls in it, more power to him. He will grow up much more nuanced and will not beat the wife he's with. I mean, yeah. You want to say something?
Just that in 10 years' time, he'll be an influencer.
Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking that we try to influence what our children read even. That is horrible, isn't it? I mean, I have...
At the Vizag Lit Fest, the gentleman stood up and said to me, my daughter refuses to read the Malala autobiography. All she wants to read is Cassandra Clare, because I wasn't... Doesn't matter. Reading is anyway important. Doesn't matter what you read. All books, whatever they are, be it a comic strip, be it Peanuts, be it makes a child sit down and read for a while and be in his own body or her body. So it really doesn't matter what the person reads. But I think if you have the ability to influence, push a son, because you were always talking today in Me Too about how the girls need to do more or the women need to do more. We're not talking enough about why our boys are so angry. why are they so angry? It's because they don't know any better. They don't know how we think. They don't know how intelligent women think. And I think if mothers and fathers have that ability to influence choice, then yes, absolutely go ahead and influence that choice. But, base level, if they're reading, let them just read.
Statistically, you have more men, even as adults, reading more men and not enough women, while women are reading as many men as women. If we don't start changing that when those men are little boys and tell them you've got to read about girls as well, how are you going to change toxic masculinity or rape culture? How are you going to tell them as children that you've got to look at girls as human beings?
Nothing that I can say in one sentence, no. It'll take a while. Maybe we should ask for another question.
I just want to say that, parents are choosing books, right? So I think publishers need to publish more books with girl protagonists, and parents need to deliberately buy those in order to change a reading culture,
I'm sorry, there are 4 minutes left. As it is, you first told us from 1 hour to 45 minutes. Now you're telling me 4 minutes before. I don't get this. Does anyone have one last question? Please ask.
Okay, talking of this gender roles and stereotypes, I came across an article on the internet where a professor from the University of Indianapolis states that it's usually under the age of 3 that children understand what the gender roles are and gender stereotypes are. So I also read that if you're not able to indulge with the child under this age, you won't be able to bring in a fact that there's nothing called gender stereotyping, because there's another gender called the third gender. It's not just the male or female. So is this really sound, or is this actually practical and applicable?
Under the age of 3, this is something that is not done through conversation. It's not done through talking. Under the age of 3, it's about how the child is treated by the people who he or she lives with. And we as parents and the caregivers, whether as grandparents or parents or teachers, we put into children the ideas about be this way or be that way, dress this way or dress that way, play this way or play that way, and then you will be loved. And children under 3 are only about love and what they receive in the relationship. What you're talking about in terms of thinking about the self as male or female, or that there is more than a binary now that we can imagine, is something that emerges in talk at a much later age. So my 7-year-old or 10-year-old can ask me about how is it that when you see people on the street who look male but are dressed in women's clothes. Now that's a complicated conversation to have. And I don't think many of us are comfortable having it or know how to have it. But under the age of 3, it's about love. A child will do and be anything in order to be loved. And there are so many families where girls are dressed up as boys, their hair is cut short and they're dressed as boys because that particular family really wanted a son. And how does that affect that child? Or the other way around, where a small boy is being dressed up as a girl for a long time because his mother really wanted to have a girl. So under the age of 3, it's about love, and we can talk for all the years afterwards.
Okay, anyway, thank you so much. The room filled up later than what I would have liked, because this was a very, very important conversation, as you all know. I really hope all of you think about buying these books as parents, as people who have been children and carry your emotional baggage from that time, and as people who think about children, are care providers, teachers, counselors. These are really progressive books for our young people. And I wouldn't be a publisher if I didn't say the books are available, the people are here, buy, get them to sign and read them. Thank you for being such a lovely audience.